We're going to start. Hi, everybody. Oh, it's 12 o'clock. Welcome to the next episode. We're here at the lovely Bastrop Opera House for Uniquely Bastrop. And I want to introduce the Executive Director of the Opera House, Lisa Holcomb. I want to say thank you for allowing us to be here today. And she has some announcement to make, so go for it.
Just want to let everybody know that our next show that we'll be having here at the Opera House is Elf the Musical. It opens December the 4th. It is a fun hip-hopping show that we've been working really hard on. It runs for 3 weekends, and not only will we have live performances here, but every Saturday performance will be live streamed. So you can watch it from the comfort of your own home if you want to, fix your own popcorn, and stay home, or you can come here and watch it as well. But tickets are limited so that we can social distance our seats. So you'll need to purchase your tickets online.
Thank you. Thanks again, Lisa. And so without further ado, we do have some guests here in the audience today. So thank you all for coming and joining us. Ken Kesslitz, come on over and talk about early development of Bastrop and Bastrop County. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I want to thank everybody that's joining us on Zoom. Wish I could see you. I want to ask the crowd here that are live to hold your applause, because it wouldn't be fair to the people who are at home and we can't hear their applause. We have a wonderful crowd here, and we're going to try to make this work in the future. Hope you can come out if you feel safe. The fact about Bastrop that in its early years that impresses me more than anything is our connection with Stephen F. Austin. So we have one place in town, one thing in town that commemorates Austin, and that's Austin Street. I wonder if anybody can think of any other place where we've commemorated Stephen F. Austin in the county. And what would that street be out there? Stephen F. Austin Boulevard, is that what it's called? It's out in the colony. So I want to start off by something I forgot to say earlier. This is a map of the county, and it shows the overlap of the colonies that were in place in the early 1830s. The green are the areas that Stephen F. Austin controlled. The purple is the area that Benjamin Milam controlled in the Milam colony. And so I want to point out to you that the Stephen F. Austin Boulevard that was just referred to is right in here where I pointed. And it is in the Milam colony, which I find kind of ironic that the only thing we have commemorating Austin is a subdivision called the Colony, in the only place that Stephen F. Austin did not have control of this county. I also want to say that just to mention that the local Daughters of the Republic of Texas chapter is seeking to find a way to pay for and place in Bastrop a monument commemorating the Baron de Bastrop. I think they're thinking now about also including Austin, which I think is most appropriate. I can sort of imagine somewhere on the riverbank, Austin pointing out to Bastrop the valley that's going to become this town, this community, this area of the state that he found much earlier and wanted to turn into Bastrop and Bastrop County. It'd be a fabulous moment in time. It would be art. So I hope you'll encourage people on the Bastrop Arts and Public Places, the City Council, and anybody else that has any resources. It could even be made, a statue like that could be made in Bastrop. Most of the colonists that came into the county, and again, I'm repeating that I'm sticking with what's currently Bastrop County. Oh, there's lots of overlap, but that's the only way to stop, have a margin for where we're going to talk about. The colonists who came in here were lucky, as you saw in that green section, that almost all of them were under the control of Impresario Stephen F. Austin. He was by and far away the best of the impresarios in the Mexican colony system. the colonists who wanted to settle in the present area of Bastrop County, as other places, except Milam's colony, would come to San Felipe de Austin and present themselves to Austin, swear an oath to become Mexican citizens, abide and agree to abide by the directives of Austin, present letters of introduction to Austin as having a good character. And I'll stop to say that the early colonists here were by and large decent people, and Austin tried to make sure that was the case. In many other colonizing areas of the world, it is escaped convicts and convicts themselves who've been sent there, people that are in trouble or people that are flat out with nothing else to lose that go off to new lands. But that wasn't true here, and I think we're lucky because of that, and the development of the town proceeded better because of that. The colonists would also have to declare their marital status. That was very important because a single person could only get a little over 1,000 acres at almost no charge granted to them to settle, but a married man would be able to have 4,428 acres, a significant difference. The earliest settlers, of course, asked for land along the river because it was the most desirable. The rules required that a fourth of it at the most be river frontage, and the rest of it would have to extend out away from the river. To just give you an idea of what 4,428 acres would be, if you are familiar with Bastrop and you went to where we're building the new bridge across the river and went to Pecan Street, and then drew a line straight to the railroad track, that's a mile, and then go east parallel, you'd come almost to Alum Creek before your 4,428 acres were used up. So you can see what kind of land by our standards was given to them. Almost nobody ever used all of it. In fact, nobody ever used all of it, but it was the only possession that that Texas had. And so land became the money of the time, if you will. The land along the river would have been good because it had, in that stretch from the river out, prairies for farming and grazing, timber for building and fuel in most places, rich bottomland in most places except on high bluffs, availability of using the river, and very often springs that could be used for domestic water without having to dig a well. The town that Austin focused on was to be the focal point of the area that would stretch well beyond Bastrop County. It was at one time equal to 15 or 20 counties, current counties in Texas, started down at LaGrange and worked its way west. But we're talking about only the current limits of Bastrop County. So Austin, as you recall, had gotten a grant for the little colony, which allowed him to build a town on the current side of Bastrop in 1827. By 1830, trying to develop an area on the upper reaches of his colony, he had scoped out the site where we are now for a place for the town, and he began to prepare it with his ideas for it to become the capital of the little colony and indeed of the entire area on the upper reaches of his colony. By 1831, by some reports, at least 2 families and a bachelor had squatted here on ground that would become Bastrop, all living in camps. Soon, one report says a group of wickiups made of pine poles covered with dried buffalo hides, sounds like a teepee to me, but served as temporary housing. Others lived in wagons. They prepared their food on open pits. And according to one old timer, one pioneer erected an actual house as early as 1830. That's not very well documented, but possibly true. As you remember, on June 8, 1832, Miguel Arcienega granted formally the town and named it Bastrop, laid out the town and various aspects that it would contain. formally granted 17,000 plus acres to the town. The location was at the very beginning of the crossing of the Colorado of the old San Antonio Road. The area that the town was granted ran from, let me say, more or less, the highway bridge, the new highway, the main highway bridge across the river, out into probably halfway between Tahitian Village and McAllister Road, and then went north up to past the current Lake Bastrop. It's a vast area of land. It was almost entirely pine forest, and that land grant became very important throughout the years for at least 70 more years in Bastrop's history. As colonists received grants of land, many of them lived in Bastrop as they began to clear land on the property that they had been granted and to plant crops. They were preparing to build simple houses quickly, just made of available material, pine or other tree logs, mud packed in the gaps, cedar shingle roofs, because so much of their energy needed to be spent on preparing for more pressing matters like farming. These settlers had come to acquire cheap and plentiful land, and they wanted above all else to get their crops started. In the outlying areas, of course, they were entirely farmers and to a tiny percent ranchers. At least 90% of those employed in any kind of occupation on this continent at that period of time were farmers, 90% plus. Farming was the entire economy almost. These people had to adopt a do without lifestyle. They did without what they could not have. They suffered from a lack of good clothing and had to deal with homespun cloth for what they wore. They suffered from lack of adequate roads. They traveled on horseback, on ox-drawn wagons, along the old San Antonio Road, the Gotcha Trace, which was simply a tiny trail along the river, but mostly through open country and eventually across the farms of the area. They suffered from a lack of good social life, although rarely entertainment was provided when neighbors could get together. They suffered from not having clergy around, and so they developed a system of having contract marriages where they would declare themselves married and wait for the priest to come to do a formal ceremony. They all had to be at least nominally Catholics and were certainly Mexican citizens. They suffered from isolation and loneliness. The people that suffered the most, I imagine, were women who had a hard life. Child rearing, milking cows, feeding chickens, toting water and building fires, making soap and candles, teaching and caring for children, as well as helping with the farming when necessary and when they were able. Sometimes even protecting themselves and their children from hostile Indians. Also, it's interesting to note that in this day and time, most of the legal environment excluded women, as if they were not really people. They also suffered from a regular lack of protection against outlaws. And so often they would kind of make up their own. One report is just too good to not read. Wally Hill from Hills Prairie reported that a man named Oscar Hume stole 4 Negroes, slaves, and 5 horses in 1835. They were pursued and caught near Nacogdoches and brought back to Bastrop. The locals got together a trial of some sort and sentenced Hume to receive 39 lashes, have 1 ear clipped, and be branded on the right hand with the letter R. Hill recalled that Hume stood the execution of the sentence bravely until the branding, which was severely executed, the smoke from which almost ascended to the top of the little blacksmith shop. I assume the blacksmith did the branding. There was also a lack of government military protection against hostile Indians. They were, as I said earlier on, not on the frontier, but beyond the frontier. They were surrounded by the possibility of Indians attacking, stealing, killing, burning their houses. Before the settlers came, the first people that Indians encountered were armed forces that accompanied surveyors who were getting the land ready to be granted. And the Indians learned to hate and fear what they knew was coming next. Incursions of whites into traditional Indian hunting grounds was naturally something that the more warring tribes did not think was a good idea. So the Comanches especially, who were the warriors of Texas, the absolute extraordinary warriors, fought back and tried to do what they could to run off the white settlers and to steal and do whatever else they wanted to them. There were a couple of tribes in our area, the Lipan and the Tonkawas, who were mostly friendly with the whites, came into town to trade with them and so forth. But what gave the settlers the most angst and the most attention, of course, were their attempt to respond to Indian hostilities. They had a loosely organized militia of volunteers that was established by Stephen F. Austin, but it was very loose and didn't function except on a very limited ad hoc basis. The leader of the group was Edward Burleson, the most prominent man to ever live in Bastrop County. He would often gather volunteers to go in retributive raids against the Indians, or maybe when a child was stolen, to try to recover the stolen child or the stolen property and to punish the Indians and discourage them from continued activities. One of the fun things for me is Burleson figured out a process which I think people that are hunters are aware of. And whenever there was a call to duty, somebody close by would shoot off a shotgun 3 times. Next person that heard it would repeat the shots, and eventually people would gather at a designated area knowing that something was up and they had to get together and go on a expedition. Also, the other thing is that they were fiercely democratic, and even with Burleson, recognized leader, whenever they had an expedition to go out, they would stop. The first thing they would do is elect a leader. There wasn't anybody pre-designated, and that whoever was there, the folks that were going to do the fighting got to choose who would be their captain. Another thing that they did in response to Indian attack was often just to live with it. The most famous event of these years in 1833 was the scalping of Josiah Wilbarger, a well-told story that if you're really interested, I've documented very, very well in my Bastrop County before statehood. Wilbarger and some others were out on a surveying expedition, and they were near the old Austin airport, now the, what's it called? Well, whatever it is, where the old Austin airport was, Miller Airport, on the edge of that on a creek. They were attacked by the Indians, and 2 of the men were killed, 3 of the men were killed, and Wilbarger was scalped. They thought he was dead. He had been shot with an arrow that paralyzed him temporarily, and he couldn't move, yell, or do anything. The scalping was not, we think, just scalping an entire piece of head off, but little patches, and they would take those little patches and hang them from their saddles, or they didn't have saddles, hang them from their horses or their teepees or whatever as a trophy of their victory. So there was a bunch of places where Wilbarger's head was cut, and he survived the scalping. There was a story of the Hornsbys were the nearest neighbors. Mrs. Hornsby in the night had a dream that he was still alive. She sent the men out to find him with some blankets. They saw Will Barger all covered with blood, thought he was an Indian, and famously Will Barger said, "Don't shoot, boys, it's Will Barger." So they brought him back, and he lived another 10 years or so. The scalp never healed, but he was able to live that long. His wife made silk caps for him out of her wedding dress. The development of the area reached a point in 1834 when the Mexican government decided it needed to have a more concentrated, bigger, better government and a municipality. And when they did that, they renamed the town and the area Mina. It was named after a Mexican hero, and probably was done in order for the Bastropians to show better loyalty to the Mexicans. By that time, I want to say this real quick before I forget it. I always tell the children, a lot of people think that the town was first called Mina. You can hear it, you can read it all kinds of places. Well, it's just not true. I just told you it was named Bastrop. The fact that we're still Bastrop means we changed it back to Bastrop. So I always tell the children, look, it's Bastrop, Mina, Bastrop. It's not Mina, Bastrop. So I have them say Bastrop, Mina, Bastrop, Bastrop, Mina, Bastrop, because I'm hoping I live long enough to get everybody to realize that's the case. The Ayuntamiento minutes are a very good source of information for us. That, along with deed records, are the primary information we have on Bastrop from 1832 until 1837. The people that came in were allowed to have 3-acre town lots and then 12-acre farm lots. The farm lots start at Farm Street and go north. The town lots are in the southern part of town. In the minutes that survived, I think I told the story the first time about how they survived. They passed things like fines for obstructing roadways, cutting down shade trees, chaining livestock in any of the streets, fighting with weapons or otherwise in the streets of Mina, quarreling or other riotous conduct. They gave permission to erect a grist mill. They gave a lot for his ownership to a man where his camp stands, which helps prove that they were living in camps at first. Save this for the next time around. By 1835, Bastrop was clearly a very promising town. It was becoming a major center in the growing colonies of Texas. But serious difficulties loomed on the horizon. And I ask you to return with us next week, next month, when I will relate these exciting events in Class 5. Question?
You talked about the clergy when they came. How often did they come? Could you repeat that too?
Yes, the first.
The clergy.
Very seldom. There's very little evidence. There was a guy named Father Muldoon who came, and known to have come once or twice, but very, very rare. There was no churches. The Methodists started a very, very, very small fledgling activity in 1835, but wasn't much of a church. And they at the best had a preacher that came sometimes. Yeah.
What year did it turn to Mina?
Okay, if I didn't make that clear, in early 1834, the Mexican legislature changed we were in the precinct of San Felipe. And so they changed and gave us a precinct and a municipality that was called Mina in 1834. So they had to pass legislation in the legislature of Texas and Coahuila to make that happen. So it was 1834. So Bastrop was Bastrop for 2 years, Mina until Class 6. Yes.
So there's one online from Robin Robinson. What did the brand of R stand for?
What's her name?
Robin Robinson.
Robin, I'm going to say I'm not going to tell you because I want you to become a historian and research that and tell us. In other words, I don't have any idea.
Okay. And then did Stephen F. Austin own any slaves?
Not as far as I know. I think he, let me say this, I didn't say a lot about slaves, but slavery was outlawed in the Mexican territory. So they would get around that by bringing in what they called indentured servants and that sort of thing, or just hiding out. There was just no law to stop them. These were mostly Southerners who came into Bastrop, into Texas. Many of them came with slaves. They were going to make a fortune on new land with cotton, and the slavery issue got taken care of in Class 6.
So it was asked to repeat the questions. Could you say the question? The first one was, what did the brand of R stand for?
What did the brand of R stand for? So I'm saying to Ms. Robinson, I don't have any idea.
And then the next question was about Stephen F. Austin.
And Stephen F. Austin, did he own slaves? Yes, I should have repeated the question.
Okay. Can you see if that's it? We have. Is there any other questions? Did you ask them on that?
Oh, if there's any other questions, we're asking in the chat. The group in the live group are so aware of all this, they're not asking questions because they already know everything. And I'm looking all over the Opera House to see, but there's no hands going up.
All right, that's it. So what's the next one about?
Well, I'm going to, I think I said that serious difficulty loomed on the horizon. The serious difficulty, of course, is what resulted in the Texas Revolution and led to any number of things. I'll talk a little more about the town and keep going on just Bastrop's involvement. And the next time is going to be a lot about our involvement with other activities that didn't exactly take place in Bastrop, but Bastrop men and women were intimately involved in the activities.
Okay.
Carol?
Do you have a date already for the next one?
These will always take place on the third Thursday of the month
Okay.
at noon.
Can we see, Lisa, do you think the third Thursday will work in December? If we wanted to use the Sure. Okay.
We'll hopefully be at this extraordinary, and this class 27 talks about the Opera House, which is a very significant part. Now, maybe not that far down the road, but anyway, this building is an extraordinary, important building in our history, and it's just astonishing that it's had a number of different lives, and is, with Lisa especially and a great board, has come to life again after a time of decline. It's just remarkable what this building is. And I think it's the building. A lot of it's the building. You just can't not use a building like this. It's a good example of the fact that in class 7 that we have old buildings still here. I'll try to tell that. We have a couple of minutes. You can all go be released. I got a question.
Well, let me just. So there's a question about, I just want to use the microphone. There's a question about are the programs available to watch later? Yes, they will be on our website under webinars. And then I have a question, can you confirm when you'll talk more about how slavery impacted Bastrop?
Yeah, I'll say that's down the road before we know very much about slavery. But yeah, I'll talk about that. Or it's possible that we'll do, instead of the time chronological process we're going through, maybe we'll find a separate time and do one on slavery. That could be one of the things. We have talked about the possibility of trying to expand. I shouldn't say that's not my program, but I heard a rumor that maybe that might happen sometime in 2021. If that's the case, I think slavery would be a great one.
I want to thank everybody for joining us, and do want to invite all of you online when you're comfortable to come out and join the audience. We do have social distancing happening. I think it's pretty safe. Lisa does a great job, so till next month. Thank you all for joining. You feel very safe? Yes, the chairs are all far apart, and we all have masks on. Well, we all have masks on, so thanks again, y'all.